Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News, an Indian perspective on All India Radio. This is Renuka, and with me is Anita Anand, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. UN says Afghans needed $5 billion to avert humanitarian crises. US announces $308 million in humanitarian aid for Afghanistan. India successfully test-fires C-to-C variant of BrahMos cruise missile and flight tests indigenous man-portable anti-tank guided missile. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar says India counts on Portugal's strong support for expanding its ties with Europe. Kazakhstan to begin withdrawal of Russian-led forces in 2 days after stabilizing the situation in the country. United States reports record 1.35 million coronavirus infections amid spread of highly contagious Omicron variant. In badminton, PV Sindhu and Kidapi Srikanth sail into the second round of India Open in Delhi, promising Indian shuttler Ashmita Chaliha defeats 5th seed Evgenia Kosteskaya in first round. And in cricket, third and final test match between India and South Africa underway at Cape Town. As the number of COVID-19 cases are rising fast in several parts of the country, we appeal to our listeners to be vigilant and get fully vaccinated and help others, including children between 15 and 18 years, to get vaccinated. As the new Omicron variant of coronavirus is causing concern, please continue to follow the 3 simple steps to stay safe. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011 2397 8046 and 1075. And now the news in detail. The United Nations said on Tuesday that it needed $5 billion in aid for Afghanistan in year 2022 to avert a humanitarian catastrophe and offer a ravished country a future after 40 years of suffering. In its biggest ever single country appeal, the UN said $4.4 billion was needed within Afghanistan, while a further $623 million was required to support the millions of Afghans sheltering beyond its borders. The UN said 22 million people inside Afghanistan and a further 5.7 million displaced Afghans and 5 neighboring countries needed vital relief this year. Since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan in mid-August last year, the country has plunged into financial chaos, with inflation and unemployment surging. Washington has frozen billions of dollars of the country's assets, while aid supplies have been heavily disrupted. Afghanistan also suffered its worst drought in decades in 2021. The White House has announced $308 million in additional humanitarian assistance for Afghanistan. White House spokesperson Emily Horn said in a statement on Tuesday that the new aid from the United States Agency for International Development will flow through independent humanitarian organizations and will be used to provide shelter, healthcare, winterization assistance, emergency food aid, water sanitization, and hygiene services. The country's long-troubled economy has been in tailspin since the Taliban takeover. Nearly 80% of Afghanistan's previous government's budget came from the international community. That money now cut off financed hospitals, schools, factories, and government ministries.
India on Tuesday successfully tested advanced C-to-C variant of the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile from INS Vishakhapatnam. Defense Research and Development Organization DRDO said the missile hit the designated target ship precisely. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has congratulated the teamwork of the Indian Navy and DRDO. In a tweet, Mr. Singh said the robustness of the Indian Navy mission readiness is reconfirmed after successful launch of the advanced version of the BrahMos missile. India's Defense Research and Development Organization DRDO successfully flight-tested man-portable anti-tank guided missile on Tuesday. The indigenously developed anti-tank missile is a low-weight and fire-and-forget missile. The missile successfully destroyed the target during the test flight. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh congratulated the DRDO for the consistent performance of the anti-tank missile, saying that this is an important step towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliance in advanced technology-based defense system development.
Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar discussed the COVID situation with his Portuguese counterpart, Augusto Santos Silva, in a telephonic conversation on Tuesday. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said the India-EU leaders meeting in Porto and Migration and Mobility Agreement with Portugal were landmarks in 2021. He said India counts on Portugal's strong support for expanding India's relations with Europe. The External Affairs Minister also held a comprehensive review of bilateral ties with Poland's Foreign Minister, Zbigniew Rau. They agreed on the importance of more political exchanges, expanded trade, smoother travel, and regional consultations. Dr. Jaishankar said he is looking forward to welcome Mr. Zbigniew Rau in India soon. Indian Minister for Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal held a meeting with Minister of Economic Affairs, Bhutan, Lyongpo Loknath Sharma in New Delhi on Tuesday. In a tweet, Mr. Goyal said during the meeting he discussed ways to further strengthen economic ties and enhance India's role as Bhutan's development partner, especially in nurturing a robust startup ecosystem. India is closely monitoring developments following the seizure of the UAE-flagged ship Rawabi off the port of Hodeidah in Yemen by the Houthis on 2nd of January. In response to media queries on Indian sailors on the ship, the External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bogchi said India is in touch with the company operating the ship. He said that out of the 11 crew members on board the ship, 7 are from India. The spokesperson said that all Indian crew members are safe and India is making all efforts to secure their early release. Minister of Trade of South Korea, Yao Han-koo, met with Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal in New Delhi on Tuesday. Both the ministers held wide-ranging discussions covering the whole gamut of bilateral trade and investment-related aspects. The ministers agreed to impart fresh momentum to the discussions on Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement upgradation negotiations. India and Korea aim to achieve the trade target of $50 billion before 2030.
White House has said that the United States is closely monitoring India-China border dispute and expressed concern over Beijing's attempt to intimidate its neighbors. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that President Joe Biden's administration continues to support dialogue and peace resolution of border disputes between India and China. Expressing concern over China's attempt to intimidate its neighbors, Psaki said U.S. will continue to stand with its partners against Beijing's behavior in the region. Last month, U.S. Defense Department had expressed concern over China's military buildup near line of actual control. And now let's listen to the hot spot.
This is All India Radio. In World News Hotspot, now we bring you a discussion on global community concerns over China's interference. The participants are Dilip Sinha, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the India-China 14th round of commander-level talks, which are scheduled to be held tomorrow. We also see that the talks between India and China come at a time of tensions, when we have seen a very aggressive China, its actions across the border, and this has created tensions in the India-China relations also. Ambassador Sinha, how do you see these talks which are going to take place tomorrow, especially when you look at the background and we have seen the Chinese aggression across the border, which has been there for the last few years now. And we also saw that the talks which happened in October last time also broke down in a stalemate. So looking at the background, how do you see these talks which are scheduled for tomorrow?
Well, these talks are taking place after a brief hiatus. As you mentioned, the last round of talks that ended in October ended with an acrimonious exchange. And thereafter, the military officers of India felt that nothing more could be achieved at the military level and the talks should be raised to the official or political level. A month later, the officials did talk to each other and they agreed to resume these military level talks. But then again, that was in November. Now it's taken almost 2 months for them to actually get around to holding the military level talks. So it was a good thing that India asserted its position. When India found that China was being obstinate and was not willing to disengage from the areas where India is keen that China disengages, then India decided to put its foot down and not hold the talks. So one has to see now what attitude China adopts at these talks. Remember that in the previous rounds, there has been some progress, and India did withdraw in some areas to provide a certain degree of disengagement. And one of the key areas was the Kailash range, because of which there was some criticism within the country also that India perhaps had given a bit much. So India is extremely keen to ensure that, especially in the Depsang Plains and down in the Demchok area, China goes back and disengages, so that our troops are able to patrol the areas that they were traditionally doing all these decades.
Master Sinha, we also see that the Chinese aggression, and we have seen a lot of analysis, a lot of debate which has centered around the rise of China in these last few years, as we have seen China, not only the economy grow, but also the military, which has been modernized. And under Xi Jinping, one sees a China which seems very intent on an expansion of territory and expansion of influence. How do you see the world in general, global powers in particular, when we look at the US, European Union? How do you see the world engaging with a China which seems quite intent on making its presence felt on the global level? Also seems very intent on increasing its influence and its territory globally.
China has been an imperial power ever since the Communist Party took over. China reconquered the territories that were earlier ruled by the Qing dynasty, the Manchu dynasty that ruled China for almost 300 years. And China, under the Communist Party, claimed all those territories as belonging to it. And China, if you remember, way back in the 1950s, also tried to export the communist revolution and create disturbances in countries that it considered as its tributary countries. Now, in recent years, we find that aggression has come back to Chinese foreign policy. And that, to my mind, has a lot to do with, one, the personality of Xi Jinping that you mentioned, and in recent years, to two factors. One is China's uncertainty in its economic front. China does face a lot of economic problems. And the other is Xi Jinping's personal ambition of equating himself and trying to achieve what Chairman Mao had done earlier. So Xi Jinping is extremely keen to get a third term endorsed by the National Congress, which will take place in October this year. And he wants to show that he is a kind of strongman that Mao was. Now, this has led to an unprecedented coming together of China's neighbors. China's policy of aggression has been strongest towards two countries. One is Taiwan and the other is India. But it also has disputes with a lot of its Southeast Asian neighbors in South China Sea and with Japan. So China feels that now that it has been able to set things right with Russia, which was its old enemy, and it has secured that particular frontier of it, it can now start taking on the other neighbors with whom it has disputes, be it in the case of India, whatever territories Tibet used to claim before when Tibet was independent, and in the case of Taiwan, the existence of Taiwan itself. But this has led to an unprecedented coming together of China's neighbors. You've seen, for example, recently we have had the quadrilateral security dialogue formed by the four countries, the US, India, China, Japan, and Australia. Then Australia and the US formed a military alliance, the AUKUS, along with the UK. And now you have Japan and Australia coming together in a military cooperation agreement. This is, again, a new development and a very big development at that, which shows that various countries are now understanding the threat that China presents, if not directly to them, to the neighborhood, and it needs to be stopped. So in this situation, we'll have to see how Xi Jinping reacts to this. So far, there is no indication that he is backing down or adopting a more conciliatory posture. Chinese officials continue to mouth the various irredentist claims of China and make all kinds of allegations against other countries and their behavior, especially against Taiwan and slightly less so, but also against India.
Ambassador Sinha, you mentioned about the Quad, and we have seen that this has been a very successful coming together of India, US, Australia and Japan. How do you see the Quad going forward, especially as we also see that there seems to be a renewed emphasis on the Indo-Pacific? And we've seen a lot of people saying that this is actually an anti-China grouping which has made China uncomfortable. Do you feel that the Quad has the potential, even if it is not that anti-China, it still has the potential to push China to a position or to a posture which is less aggressive? Do you feel that this sends a message to China, and is that showing of late?
Well, that is exactly the aim of Quad. Quad is meant to bring together the four major democracies in this region to cooperate with each other, both to strengthen their own position and also to give reassurance to the other smaller countries in the region, especially in Southeast Asia, that these countries are there and they need not fear any hegemonistic designs by China. Now, there are various other areas in which Quad is cooperating which are not directed against China, but the fact that China is there and is pursuing its aggressive policies automatically gives Quad a certain role that brings it in confrontation with China, and that is really for China to choose whether it wants to live in peace with its neighbors or it wants to confront them and threaten them as it is doing in the case of Taiwan and the border regions of India. And in this kind of a situation, it is inevitable that Quad will take a strong stand against any aggression by China. Now, I mentioned that in the Quad, the other three countries have already entered into military agreements. The Quad is still a security dialogue arrangement, but if the situation becomes more difficult, then I'm sure the military option will have to be brought in, and the security cooperation in the Quad will have to be upgraded to a more level of greater military cooperation to ensure that not only the interests of the Quad, but also of the other countries around China are protected.
And we will follow the India-China talk. Thank you.
China on Monday reacted cautiously to Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's request for Beijing's assistance in mitigating his country's deepening forex crisis and spiraling external debt. The development comes amid criticism from some sectors that expensive joint Chinese investments that are not profitable are partly responsible for Sri Lanka's struggling economy. Beijing said it will help Colombo to the best of its capacity after China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi returned after a series of diplomatic visits to the Maldives and Sri Lanka. Wang, in his visit to Colombo on Sunday, held talks with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, his elder brother Mahinda Rajapaksa, and Foreign Minister G.L. Peris. China is seeking to deepen its ties with Sri Lanka, making billions of dollars of investments in ports and infrastructure projects amid criticism of debt trap.
Kazakhstan president has said that Russian-led forces will begin withdrawing from the country in 2 days' time after fulfilling its main mission of stabilizing the Central Asian country following serious unrest. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev told Parliament in a video conference call on Tuesday that he was appointing a long-serving career public servant, Alikhan Smilov, as the Prime Minister. The President also spoke of initiatives to narrow the wealth gap, raise taxes on the mining sector, and eliminate irregularities in state procurement. 68-year-old Tokayev last week asked the Moscow-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, to send in troops at the peak of what he later said was an attempted coup d'etat whose unnamed instigators had plunged half of the oil-rich nation's territory into violence. He said the main mission of the CSTO peacekeeping forces has been successfully completed. The President also said the withdrawal process of the contingent will take no more than 10 days. The United States reported 1.35 million new coronavirus infections on Monday. According to reports, it was the highest daily total for any country in the world as the spread of the highly contagious Omicron variant showed no signs of slowing. The previous record was 1.03 million cases on January the 3rd. A large number of cases are reported each Monday due to many states not reporting over the weekend. The 7-day average for new cases has tripled in 2 weeks to over 7 lakh new infections a day. More than 141,000 Americans were hospitalized with COVID-19 as of Monday, according to data from the Department of Health and Human Services, nearing the record of 142,246 hospitalizations on January the 14th, 2021. Uganda School reopened on Monday to students after 83 weeks closure, ending the world's longest school disruption due to the COVID-19 pandemic, says the UNICEF. The reopening caused traffic congestion in some areas of the capital, Kampala. In-person learning has been partially or completely non-existent across the country since March 2020.
The Beijing Organizing Committee for the 2022 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games said locking down Beijing during the Winter Olympic Games is not an option for now. It said the COVID-19 prevention policies will be adjusted if a large-scale outbreak occurs during the closed-loop operation of the event. The Winter Olympics are only 3 weeks away, and China is now facing waves of new COVID-19 outbreaks from both Omicron and Delta variants. Huang Shun, a senior official from the organizing committee, said that unless there is a large systematic outbreak during the event, there is no need to adjust the current COVID-19 prevention policies. Yet there is room for flexibility of changing policies, said Huang, noting that the current stage locking down Beijing is not an option. In recent months, Chinese authorities have imposed ever more stringent restrictions to curb local COVID flare-ups as Beijing prepares for the Winter Olympics. An Omicron outbreak in Beijing's neighboring city Tianjin just weeks before the games begin on February the 4th puts an uphill task before the officials, who are now likely to ramp up efforts to protect the capital Beijing and China's zero COVID policy. No details are yet out about the fans present in the stadiums. Meanwhile, capital Beijing has issued notice to its residents not to travel during upcoming Chinese Year holidays unless absolutely necessary. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
UNESCO's World Heritage Centre has agreed to publish Hindi descriptions of India's UNESCO World Heritage Sites on its website. The permanent delegation of India to UNESCO announced this on the occasion of the World Hindi Day. In a tweet, Indian Education and Skill Development Minister Dharmendra Pradhan welcomed the decision. He said that Hindi is a matter of pride for every Indian and Hindi lover. Mr. Pradhan said the popularity of Indian languages on the global stage is encouraging. India has got the approval of the United States Department of Agriculture (USDA) for export of Indian mangoes to US. Consumers in the United States will now have access to quality mangoes from India. Over 1,000 metric tons of mangoes were exported to US in 2019-20. Exporters have expressed hope that the export of mangoes this year will surpass the previous figures. The US approval would pave the way for exports of mangoes from Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. The export of Indian mangoes was restricted by the US since 2020 following ban on international travel during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Sensex and the Nifty today witnessed modest gains. Both stocks were added amid mixed global cues. The Sensex regained the 60,500 mark, a report from the business world.
BSE Sensex rose by 221 points or 0.37% to close at 60,617. NSE Nifty also added 52 points or 0.29% to settle at 18,056. Asian equities struggled to find direction as investors awaited the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's appearance before the Senate Banking Committee, hoping for clues to the timing of the expected policy tightening. Singapore Straits Times Index gained 0.6%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng and South Korea's Kospi both ended almost flat. Japan's Nikkei 225 declined 0.9%, and China's Shanghai Composite Index ended 0.7% down. European markets were up in intraday trade. Brent crude prices rose to around $82 a barrel. Arjun Chaudhary for World News, All India Radio.
In badminton, two-time Olympic medalist PV Sindhu, top seed Kidambi Srikanth and world champion Loh Kian Yew of Singapore advanced into the second round of the India Open on Tuesday. Sindhu defeated compatriot Sri Krishna Priya in straight games 21-5, 21-16 to enter the second round of women's singles event of Yonex Sunrise India Open at KT Jadhav Indoor Hall in Delhi. Earlier, promising Indian shuttler Ashmita Chaliha defeated Russia's 5th seed and world number 28 Evgenia Kosteskaya 24-22, 21-16 on the opening day of the Super 500 event. She would face Yeli Hoyaux of France in the second round. In men's single, World Championship silver medalist Kidambi Srikanth triumphed over Cyril Verma 21-17, 21-10 in the first round. He will take on Denmark's Kim Broen. In cricket, South Africa lost their first wicket early as Jasprit Bumrah removed their skipper John Elgar minutes before stumps on day one of the third and final test against India at the Newland Stadium in Cape Town today. South Africa was 17 for 1, trailing India by 206 runs. Earlier, Indian captain Virat Kohli was dismissed on 79 as the visitors suffered yet another batting collapse in the ongoing Test series against South Africa. Kohli was the lone fighter for India as the touring side was bowled out for 223 runs in the first innings. The three-match series is evenly poised with both teams winning a Test match each. The score so far: South Africa 17 for 1, India 223.
A U.S. man has become the first person in the world to get a heart transplant from a genetically modified pig. Doctors say that 57-year-old David Bennett is doing well 3 days after the experimental 7-hour procedure in Baltimore. The transplant was considered the last hope of saving Mr. Bennett's life, though it is not yet clear what his long-term chances of survival are. Mr. Bennett, a day before the surgery, said it was either to die or do this transplant. He said it was his last choice. Doctors at the University of Maryland Medical Center were granted a special dispensation by the U.S. medical regulator to carry out the procedure on the basis that Mr. Bennett, who has terminal heart disease, would otherwise have died. He had been deemed ineligible for a human transplant, a decision that is often taken by doctors when the patient is in very poor health. The pig used in the transplant had been genetically modified to knock out several genes that would have led to the organ being rejected by the Bennett's body, a news agency reported. For the medical team who carried out the transplant, it marks the culmination of years of research and could change lives around the world. Now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The New York Times, quoting WHO, reports that over half of Europe could be infected with COVID in the next 2 months. Washington Post notes U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is recommending better masks to protect against Omicron. The Wall Street Journal notes U.S. Fed chairman is expected to win a second term leading to the central bank, but faces questions about the job market and inflation at his Senate confirmation hearing. The Globe and Mail reveals that Canada's spy agency wants MPs to beware of influence operations from China. The Guardian, quoting a World Bank report, says developing countries are at risk from global economic threats. Financial Times says inflation in rich economies surges to a 25-year high. South China Morning Post reports China's Omicron threat under control. No lockdown planned for Beijing Winter Olympics, organizers say. Sputnik News says that Novak Djokovic's medical exemption saga gets murkier as his COVID test QR code throws mixed results.
And now a quick look at the headlines once again. UN says Afghans needed $5 billion to avert humanitarian crisis. US announces $308 million in humanitarian aid for Afghanistan. India successfully tests fire C-to-C variant of BrahMos cruise missile and flight tests indigenous man-portable anti-tank guided missile. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar says India counts on Portugal's strong support for expanding its ties with Europe. Kazakhstan to begin withdrawal of Russian-led forces in 2 days after stabilizing the situation in the country. United States reports record 1.35 million coronavirus infections amid spread of highly contagious Omicron variant. In badminton, PV Sindhu and Kidambi Srikanth sail into the second round of India Open in Delhi. Promising Indian shuttler Ashmita Chaliha defeats 5th seed Evgenia Kosteskaya in first round. And now let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnavajan, by artists from Morocco. with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.